Hi and welcome to this Banking and Financial Markets Careers video. In this video, we're going to be talking about 3 key steps to the recruitment process to help you prepare this summer. What we will cover are key recruitment timelines and how to stay ahead. We'll talk about successful application behaviours, virtual and automated assessment tasks, and key tools and resources to boost your preparation. Number 1, understanding the market. It's probably very obvious to think about where you'd like to work. On screen, you can see some examples of where you might apply to. Of course, these are just some examples where you can apply to, and it's important to do your research into what might suit you best. You can see on screen a number of different entry-level job titles, although, of course, if you're going into more technical, regulatory, or operational roles, they may have a different number of titles. When you're thinking about researching the market, think about any impact you might have in your role or that your firm will have. Think about salary, the structure of the firm, the size of the firm, and what type of clients they have. Thinking about all of these different things and the ecosystem you're applying to can really help. It's also important to think about where you'd like to work in the world. Some of you may like to stay in your home time. Some of you might like to travel across the globe. Of course, when you're considering what offices you want to apply to, you need to think about any visa requirements, languages you need to speak, and also their recruitment timeline, which might be different to major city organizations. It's also important to think about what type of opportunity you might be applying to and when you might apply to it. And this will change depending on your stage of study, whether you've graduated or you have some experience. If you're very, very early in your study, perhaps just starting your first year or coming into your second year of a 4-year degree, it's likely your applications are going to be focused on spring weeks or even insight days. When you get across to your second year, penultimate year, or as a finalist, or maybe you're on an advanced degree program that offers where employers offer specific programs for advanced degrees, you're going to be looking at this larger middle column, such as summer internships, graduate schemes, access programs, insight and discovery programs, and off-cycle internships. It's worth noting that off-cycle internships are also available to people who have graduated or are coming out of any period of study, including research. If you are out of graduation for a long time, or you have around 2 years experience, you may be thinking about direct entry or fixed term roles. Direct entry and fixed term roles are also available to you if you're just leaving study and have little experience, but they will still be entry level. It's worth noting here that the majority of recruitment, specifically into investment banks, hedge funds, private equity firms, tends to go to people who already have experience with that firm. And that's where you'll see up to 70% of hiring will go to people who have already had a long summer internship or been part of a more substantial insight program where they've already had a chance to recruit you, interview you, and essentially test you out in the workplace. So if you're not somebody who already has one of those longer internships, it's very likely you'll be applying to roles where you have got to compete with a much larger proportion of people, and it's less likely that you'll be successful in your application. Though, of course, this is a very complex market where there are always opportunities, and therefore don't give up if you're very keen just because you don't have an internship. It just means you might need to be more creative, and the Career Service here is certainly happy to help you. It's important to talk about access routes into the sector that may fall outside of traditional recruitment patterns. These are normally focused on equality, diversity, and inclusion initiatives and are really there to champion and represent people who are underrepresented in the sector. This can include women in tech, people going into hard-to-fill vacancies such as technology, thinking about leadership programs, and also thinking about people from minority backgrounds, socioeconomically poor backgrounds, or people who have essentially had a harder time to make it into industry. On screen, you can see just a few examples of things that have happened in the last year's recruitment cycle, but of course there are a number of other festivals, celebration events, and focus groups that can help people who are underrepresented enter into this industry. Some of these can have very formal application processes. Some of them are easy to access events, but they are very much worth keeping in touch with and attending if you'd like to access outside of the main recruitment channels. It's also very important to realise the competitive nature of entering into this sector. It is essentially one of the most, if not the most competitive graduate landscape for recruitment across the UK, US, and globally. There's just a few figures on screen that are representative of investment banks and commercial banks and bold brackets. What you can see here is across the years, there are essentially thousands and thousands of applications to each firm. And there are, of course, much less opportunities available than there are to the number of applicants. If you are looking at a very, very competitive top tier investment bank, you've probably got around a 1% chance of success for getting in. And as I mentioned previously, most of those opportunities will go to people who are either entering into hard to fill markets or are going from an internship that they've already had with that organisation. The rest of the opportunities will be available to people applying in their final year or those who are leaving study from a master's or advanced degree, and even some that are applying to off-cycle. What you'll see on the right-hand side is that across the years, the number of vacancies has gone down, but actually the number of applicants to those vacancies have gone up. So it's important to remember that, particularly with the advent of generative AI, where people are making applications themselves a lot easier, it means the competition has got a lot more difficult. And that's why, just to reiterate, making fewer but higher quality applications can be a good strategy. It doesn't mean you shouldn't apply because it's so competitive, but just be prepared for the fact that it is, and you may be managing multiple stages of an application at one time. Number 2, understanding and preparing for the recruitment process. There's 6 top tips for recruitment success, which you can see on screen. Number 1 is making sure you find out as much as you can about where you're applying to. This is relatively easy to access now, particularly since COVID, where most events are online. If they are in person, do make the effort to attend, even if you're very busy, because getting that face time can really help. Second is prepare early. Essentially, each year you'll be looking to apply during the summer, and that's normally a year or even 15 months in advance of the start date. So do apply early. If you're looking for off-cycle or graduate roles, then you can probably expect to apply at least 3 months in advance. Number 3 is practice. Most people fall out of the recruitment process at the online testing and video stage. You can practice these through the career service. Practice, practice, practice. Number 4, factor in multitasking. Make a plan now to manage your study and work commitments around applications and interviews. It is inevitable that you will be managing multiple applications and interviews at the same time. Preparation is key for this. So think about what you might have to sacrifice or what you might need to prioritise during this time when your academic study is also a priority. Number 5 is expect short notice. You may only get 3 days to take your test or submit an interview. Check your mail regularly because this is where recruiters will send your tests. And if you don't complete them in the time limit, you usually don't get another chance. And number 6 is have a backup plan. I've shared some of the competitive recruitment statistics. These are real and true. So that means you need to have a backup plan because the odds are not in your favour. Here's an example cycle for a commercial or investment bank. First, you'll submit some type of form or CV to give an indication of your interest and background. This is a basic screening stage so they can see that you are suitable. The next will be your online tests, which will normally be sent to you through an automated email. Make sure you complete them on time. Number 3 is your video interview. This is an automated interview where you self-record your answers. Number 4 is your in-person or virtual interview. If you've made it through these rounds, you may get a telephone, in-person or virtual interview, normally with real people. And this can be different kinds of people. This could be HR as well as junior people in the firm and to senior people. Next, you'll have your assessment centre or super day. This is case study tasks, group interviews, and final round interviews. And then next, you'll get your offer employment or rejection. Some firms will add in steps here. They may put in dinners or drinks to help you get to know the firm and for them to get to know you. And some may be shorter. The size of the firm really plays a part here because small partnerships are very keen to get to know you and may put more effort in the early stages of making it more personable. If you're looking at a quant research or data scientist example, then you can expect to have the similar number of stages, again, depending on the size of the firm, but the types of tests will be different. They'll be thinking about your cognitive abilities, maybe even your problem solving or problem solving through puzzles. They may be thinking about your process, and they'll talk this through with you. You'll also get some behavioural interviews separate to that to make sure that you actually fit to the culture of the firm. That's particularly important if it's a small organisation. And then thinking about your other automated screening interviews, online tests and application form, which would come as a standard part of the process. For some roles, you'll have a take-home test. This is where they'll want you to do a task at home that they've set you, but then you'll bring it in with you or you'll talk about it in an interview. And this is where the interviewers will really be wanting to check your process. And again, this will end up with an offer of employment or rejection. And you can expect to be more or less personable depending on the size of the firm. Number 3 is actually how you prepare for these applications, assessments, and interviews. So as we've covered, there's 3 common stages to the application process. This is application, testing, and interview. And these will all take different forms depending on the type of application you're making and to what type of firm you're making. But you'll normally find you get these 3 stages. So let's start with the basics. Many firms are still using CVs and cover letters. And with the advent of generative AI and ChatGPT, these things have become easier to submit, but maybe harder to get shortlisted. So let's think about things that can make it through applicant tracking systems and, importantly, still through the eyes of that human in the loop. The basics really are that a CV should be clear, concise, and target your achievements, and you should be really specific about your relevant skills. This may seem obvious, but things that come across my desk quite regularly are CVs that have large paragraphs explaining what you were doing across an internship or experience and not specifically noting what your achievements were or what your impact was. So there's 3 main factors to an impactful CV for a commercial market. Make it quantitative, so make sure you provide percentages and numbers to support your claims around your interactions. Make sure your employer can understand the scope and depth and context of everything you've been working in. Next, let's think about impact. So make sure you lead with your outcomes and the impact that you had. And that's where your quantitative information really works together with your impact. So for example, I improved the queuing time to this event by 7%, reducing the waiting time by 30 minutes. Finally, the action. So be clear on your actions and the role. This is really about you and your achievement. So what was it that you did in that process? Did you code the app? Did you create the QR code? Were you the person that was in charge of the budget for that program? What was it that you were specifically doing? And you can expand on that in your cover letter. So 3 main things: quantitative, impactful, and action orientated. Let's have a look at that in a little bit more detail. Here's the first 4 things to think about in that successful CV. Very basic elements can sometimes have the biggest impact. Let's start with your contact information. Make it clear, make it concise, and make sure any of your links are working if you include them. This section doesn't need to take up 1/3 of your CV, and you do not need to include your full address. If you're in the UK, you do not need to include a picture. Number 2 is thinking about your font size and your font choice. I've put some examples on the screen here so that you can use them to get through an applicant tracking system, but also importantly to remember the human in the loop and who might be reading it. So thinking about making something readable, but also making sure that you're able to structure normally onto one page is useful. Now let's think about clear headings. We don't need multiple headings, we just need 4 clear headings around education, experience, skills, and interests. Now, you can change these slightly, of course, to match what your specific experiences are, but this will really help you to build a CV that is clear and concise, particularly if you're starting from scratch. And 4 is white space. We'll come into this in more detail, but do leave some breathing room for the human or the machine to read so that it's clear what you're trying to tell them. This is particularly important if a human only has a few minutes or not so much time to be able to read your CV, that it's clear and concise and essentially not too draining on them. Okay, let's look at points 5 to 8. So as mentioned, you want to quantify any impact, giving statistics and numbers to any achievements that you have been able to gain. Make sure you format correctly. Now, this is down to personal choice, but to help it to be easy to be scanned from left to right, think about putting your headings on the right and your dates on the left-hand side. And also think, as you look at it, and also thinking about listing things in reverse chronological order. So making sure your most recent achievements are on the top. Make sure you are to the point. So use bullet points and list only key facts and achievements. This isn't about your day-to-day tasks. This is about achievements. Then think about skills and keywords. Skills and keywords that are relevant to the role that you've picked up from the job description. Make sure you use them in the context of your achievement. So don't just list them to stuff. So not just writing lists of skills, but actually putting them in the context of your achievements. It's also important to absolutely be specific about your suitability to the requirements. Lots of recruiters receive applications from people that at a very basic level are not suitable or not eligible for the role. So make sure you make that information as clear as possible. Here we are looking at academic qualification, we are looking at dates for study, we are looking at basic key skills that have been asked for, and we are looking at making sure that you are clear that you are going to be available for the internship that you are applying to. This is very, very basic entry level, starting from scratch information, but you would be surprised how many people apply to roles they are not suitable for, or if they are suitable for them, they don't make it clear. Now, we talked about leaving some white space, having clear headings, and making sure that our CV reads chronologically. Now, heat mapped eye tracking is very open and available on the internet to see how it is done. Here's just an example from the ladders on the right-hand side of your screen to show some eye tracking data from a recruiter. And what you'll see is they spend most of their time looking down that column that has the headers on it. Now, this is important because you essentially want the hot and the cool places on your CV. If you pack your CV with too much information, it's very difficult for the recruiter to know where their eye should land and where they get the information they need. Here on the right-hand side, you can see that with large amounts of text, the recruiter isn't sure where their eyes should land. Where should they rest and where should they search for information? This is because there are, in the example on the right-hand side, there's quite a lot of text from edge to edge. What we want is some hot and some cool spaces, and the hot space is normally on that side with the headings. Now let's have a look at your cover letter. Your cover letter really follows the same principles of clarity and specificity as the CV, but here's where you're able to give a bit more context to some of your achievements. So number one is make sure you open with impact, make that statement impactful so that the recruiter wants to carry on reading it. Number two is make sure you use all of your experience. You can put experiences, both academic, extracurricular, and professional, all together to give a combined list of examples of where you've been able to meet the skills and criteria of the role. Number three is linking the job spec to the firm. So you want to be thinking about linking the actual job spec and the firm to some of your interests and achievements. Do make sure, in point number 4 here, that you include some of your personal interests, particularly if you've been quite successful in those personal internships, such as competitive sports, if you've traded your own money, if you have volunteered and that's made a big impact. They are very interested in skills that are built up in a range of experiences, not just formal internships. Number 1, 2, and 3 here really focus on this second half of your cover letter. So combine your experiences. You don't have to go into detail in every single experience, but you can use a number of different experiences to highlight a single skill. A little bit like on the previous page where we talked about bringing experiences together to show that you have a number of different skills. Here you can look at different skills and use the same type of experience to evidence it. Focus on the firm. So when you're looking to close out a letter, you are not just interested in how you're suitable for the job or even how you fit with the job yourself as a person in terms of your temperament, but actually the firm. What's the mission of the firm? What's your understanding of the firm, and how might you bring your experience? And number 3 is your closing statement. Leave them feeling energized. And as you can see in this letter, closing off with what you can bring to the firm rather than what you want to get from it is a really good idea. Online tests are the point in the recruitment process where most people find either they opt out, they don't want to take the opportunity, or they fail. And this is because, one, there is such a high volume of people taking this test that it's impossible for everybody to succeed. And secondly, because people don't tend to rehearse them in advance. It's particularly a weakness point if you have in your mind, well, I'm very good with numbers, I'm very good with maths, I play games all the time, therefore I don't need to rehearse, this is going to be easy. But actually what we tend to not consider is the pressure of time. If we have to do something with higher stakes and we have to do it under a time pressure, that can affect our performance, even if we are studying PhD mathematics, or we solve problems daily through our study. If you are under pressure and the stakes are higher, sometimes that can affect performance. So just have a little go at these games, and you can do these through the Career Service on our Graduates First platform. Here you'll see there's a number of different types of games. That can be numerical, it can be reaction or logistical games. You can have logical reasoning games, and you can have verbal reasoning games. It's important to just practice these to see how you do, and also to understand where you might have gone wrong. On any practice platform, you'll get a report at the end that tells you how you did and where you might improve. There are, of course, roles where you will have to have a very expert technical knowledge and the ability to use, for example, multiple programming languages, or to be able to understand market probability and use problem solving, or understand particular financial models or build financial models to do that. Now, tests around these areas are what we might find in that take-home portion of the interview. And of course, there are guides that are much more comprehensive than this around these tests. This is just to make you aware that these will be expected. Here you can see examples from HackerRank and LeetCode, as well as Jane Street's Probability and Markets Guide that's downloadable from their website to help you see the kinds of technical tests you might experience. Both of these platforms have practice tests. Some of them are paid for. You can also do data and coding tests through Graduate First. Now, one of the areas of interviewing that is less popular with people is the pre-recorded interview. And this is where an employer will put through predetermined questions that you have to answer through a recorded video interview. Now, you can practice these interviews, and I would recommend that you get familiar with the job spec and particularly the fit areas of the firm. So looking at their key values, their key cultures, but also thinking about how you might approach some of the problems that organisation faces. Some of these are going to be about your interest and motivation in the firm and the sector itself. So you can prepare for these broad-based video questions by doing some research into the firm and really considering your motivation, as well as going back and considering your CV and cover letter and application documents and bringing up any relevant experiences you might have. It's important to practice these and watch yourself. When you are watching the playback, you're able to see any nuances, what your persona and your background look like on screen, and also testing your sound quality, as well as thinking about any light levels that are in particular areas of your room. There's lots to think about in these interviews, but they are achievable if you can do the preparatory practice. You might find that you're doing multiple rounds of interviews at the same time, and therefore you want to think about preparing for these interviews in advance because it's likely they're going to be part of the recruitment process. If all else fails and you don't get a pre-recorded video interview, then just doing the research on that firm is going to help you make a better application and just make a better general interviewer should you get to the in-person stage. So what to do now? Make a tracking sheet for anything you're applying to. There are a few pre-made ones on the internet, but make sure you have one in a format that fits you. Second is prepare your documents. Even if you're not ready to apply yet, make sure you have a basic CV and cover letter available. Number 3 is practice tests and interviews. Even if you haven't been invited to any of them yet, please practice them online way in advance so that you feel comfortable should they come at short notice. You can do this through the Cambridge Career Service, selecting our How Can We Help practice interviews, and you'll see that you're able to access it there. Number 4 is have a backup plan. This is a incredibly competitive industry, and therefore it's likely you'll need to look to work in another sector or a similar sector, but a different role that's less competitive. Don't leave those other applications till later. There are some resources and reading that you can access on our website, or you can go directly there to either eFinancial Careers, Careers in Banking and Financial Markets Guide, which gives you a sector overview and is very useful for understanding the specific ins and outs around skills and interests and prerequisites to entering the sector, as well as what a typical day in the life is for particular roles. They also include very valuable salary information if that is one of your drivers. The next is our Banking and Financial Markets Guide to Recruitment. This is a document which gives you the basics overview of what happens in recruitment across the year. And then we have a number of videos on our YouTube channel, as well as our market sector overview document that you can access through our A to Z sector page by clicking on Banking and Financial Markets. It's also useful, if you have the time, to read around the sector. I myself have been reading Andrew Ross Sorkin's Inside the Battle to Save Wall Street, Too Big to Fail. I've also been reading When Genius Failed by Roger Lowenstein and Liar's Poker by Michael Lewis. These are much older publications that deal with financial events that happened 10, 15, 20 years ago, but they're useful in understanding essentially the relationships that happen within banking and financial markets that help the industry to tick over. You can pause the video now and read on screen the next steps. In short, these are: write down a list of your motivations, reflect on your experience in the sector, consider why banking and financial markets fits with your career values, and think about what you can do now to prepare. So not just applications, but thinking about how you might fit into this sector. All of this will help you to feel confident in your ability to enter into these firms and to make strong applications. Thank you for listening. You can access all of the materials I mentioned on careers.cam.ac.uk. You can find us on LinkedIn and social media. And if you'd like to attend any further events and book appointments on Handshake, you can do so by going through your account or activating it if you haven't already.